afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Larry Fenelon. I'm a member of the RDS Committee of Enterprise, the organiser of today's event. It's my pleasure to welcome you to today's RDS Vision 2030 webinar, which is entitled The Formula for Success in the Next Decade, with Anne Heraty, founder and chief executive of CPL Resources plc. So for those of you who haven't joined us before, the RDS Vision 2030 series aims to harness the insights and expertise of Ireland's thought leaders, influencers and innovators to identify the opportunities and threats facing Ireland and its business community over the next decade. Focus is firmly on the future and what Ireland could do to ensure economic, environmental and socially sustainable development. The RDS has been sharing ideas and shaping Ireland's economic and cultural development for 290 years. And today's webinar is just another way in which we continue to do this. The continued delivery of programmes such as the RDS Vision 2030 series is only made possible by the input and support of the volunteer members of the Society. RDS membership is open to individuals and companies alike, and it brings many benefits, including excellent facilities at the RDS Members Club, meeting rooms, library, links to reciprocal clubs around the world, but most importantly, an opportunity to support the work of the Society. Details of membership can be found on rds.ie. Today, I'm delighted to welcome Anne Heraty to discuss the future of work and how business must adapt and innovate to be relevant in the next decade. Anne is joined by our host for the afternoon, Richard Curran. Anne and Richard will be well known to most of our viewers, but allow me to make a brief introduction to both. Anne Heraty is recognised as one of Ireland's most successful entrepreneurs and is also the first female chief executive of an Irish listed company. Anne started the company in 1989 and through her vision and leadership took CPL public a decade later. She developed CPL into a market leader in recruitment and employment services. As you may know, CPL recently announced that it had been agreed to be taken over by Japanese group Outsourcing in a deal worth €318 million. The premium price paid for CPL recognises its position as market leader in both tech and pharma sectors, key sectors in the future of the Irish economy. Anne is rightly celebrated as one of the leading figures in Irish business and has received numerous awards and accolades throughout her career. Richard Curran is a journalist, broadcaster and author. He is the presenter of The Business and RTE Radio 1 and is also columnist with the Irish Independent and Sunday Independent. So without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, over to you, Richard.
Thank you very much, Larry, for those introductions. I'm delighted to be here today and to have an opportunity to speak to Anne Heraty about, looking forward to hearing about her story, past, present and future. She's been a very, very busy woman during the lockdown as well, it seems. So, Anne, you're very welcome. First of all, it's difficult to talk about things or to begin with things that don't relate to COVID in some way. It's caused so much upheaval in our lives. But tell me a little bit about how you've been managing in terms of running CPL during this crisis and the challenges that that brought, and how you're managing yourself during lockdown.
Oh, I have to say the environment has been tough. There's no doubt about that. Quite sudden in a lot of ways how it came upon us last March. But I have to say we were fortunate in that we had always invested in our technology systems. So we were very quickly able to support people to get them to work from home. Almost, over the course of that weekend of the 12th of March, everybody was working from home very quickly up on Microsoft Teams. I mean, we had a plan that we were going to have everybody trained. The IT team were going to train everybody and have that. Their goal was to have it done by the end of June. They had it done within 3 days. So it's amazing what can be done when a crisis comes upon you. And people have worked very effectively from home. Now, it has brought a lot of changes in terms of how we work with people, just the level of communications we have to take. And I've particularly noticed in this lockdown now, it seems to be a bit harder for people. I think the homeschooling is really getting to some of the parents who work with us. They're finding that very challenging, particularly if two parents are working and they're trying to homeschool as well. So, there's a lot going on and we have to spend a lot of time in terms of trying to support people, focusing on people's health and well-being and helping them to focus on it themselves. And we do a lot of work around that right across the group. I suppose from my own perspective, I see my job as really empowering people and keeping people motivated and engaged. And to do that, I have to make sure that I stay motivated and engaged myself. So I've changed a lot how I'm working too. I was never a proponent of working from home. I was one of those people who went to the office early in the morning, liked being around the office. Whereas actually I have really gotten used to working from home now. I take regular breaks, go out for walks early in the morning. We're doing a steps challenge at work. So I suppose it's been a bit better for my health and fitness, actually, in a lot of ways.
And have you sort of taken the views or taken the temperature of your staff about the future and how they feel about remote working, even when this is all over? I presume it's quite mixed. Some people like the idea of getting back into the office. Others would be delighted to continue working outside.
Yeah, I think it's going to be quite tricky because that's exactly what we're seeing. There are certain people who really want to work in the office and it suits them to work in the office. And actually, they don't like working from home and they maybe need that kind of form and structure of the office. Other people, on the other hand, are really enjoying not having to commute. They're enjoying the work-life balance that it's bringing. I'd have to say, I think productivity is up. In general, people are working very hard. So it's mixed. And I suppose what I think will happen going forward is it'll be a type of hybrid working model that we'll have where people will work from home maybe 1 or 2 days a week and in the office the rest of the time, because we do need to connect and we do need to collaborate as a team. And while technology has really facilitated that, and it's fantastic, that human connection is very important to maintain. And I can see people missing it at the moment.
It's funny, some of us are struggling to do what we need to do to get through this. And it has dragged on now for 10 months and counting. But you've actually negotiated the sale of CPL to a major Japanese corporation for over 300 million. And I read recently that your investment in Trinity Care Homes, that business is being sold as well. So was that all part of a plan, or how does that come about?
Well, with regard to CPL, first of all, and the outsourcing deal, I mean, one of the things we really wanted for CPL is to be able to grow the business globally, and also to be able to offer to our clients a broader footprint than we had just here and across Europe. And of course, you see the rise of the Asian economies. So we're actually quite excited about the opportunities that partnering with OSI will bring to us. So we had been in talks with them. We had spoken to them just before lockdown, and then lockdown happened, and we knew of them as opposed to that we had spoken of them. And then lockdown happened, and of course nothing was going to happen then. But I think they admired how we handled lockdown. We proved ourselves to be quite resilient. I mean, we took our hits for sure, but we were pretty resilient. And then they came back and approached us, and we got into discussions with them. It was very different doing a deal during lockdown, but it's amazing just how much can get done when you're just focusing on the facts and looking at the reality of a situation.
Yeah. Did you end up negotiating a 300 million euro deal over Zoom, basically? Is that what happened?
Not totally. We did have some face-to-face contact as well. The chairman of outsourcing did come to Ireland, and so did a number of their executives. And we met them face-to-face. But actually, that was a relatively short period of time. The majority of the work and the majority of the due diligence had to be done over Zoom and over technology.
And you had met the buyers before, they had been on the radar. Just in relation to your investment in Trinity Care Homes, a lot of people probably wouldn't have realised that yourself and your husband Paul were shareholders in it. Was that something that happened quickly? Somebody just came over the hill, or was that in the planning stage for some time?
No, it wasn't in the planning stage for some time. I mean, I worked with a great team of people in Trinity Care. The CEO is Keith Robinson, and himself and CFO and the HRD and indeed their leadership team there had worked really hard across a long number of years in that business. And I suppose there's a lot of interest in the healthcare sector at the moment. And it just happened that this company approached Keith and were keen. And they have a lot of care homes all over, nursing homes all over Europe. So they were an ideal partner, really good quality. And, that's what's important in that kind of healthcare business. I mean, you're dealing with elderly people. And again, Trinity Care had handled the pandemic very well.
Do you think that's something we'll see more of in the home care, nursing care sector, that there would be international companies, bigger players, looking at the Irish market and acquiring more businesses here?
I think that's likely, and I think it has happened over the last number of years. So I think there's been a lot of interest over a number of years in that sector, and I think we've seen a number of deals happen in it. Yeah.
Now, I want to go back to the start and back to County Longford. You're growing up. There's business very much in the family. What's going on in your head as to what it is you want to do career-wise when you were in secondary school, for example?
Well, there was a mix of things going on in my head. So in my earlier year, I grew up in a family business, and in my earlier years, I always thought, even as a very young person, I always thought I'd like to go into business. And then my father got ill when I was in secondary school. And at that stage, I actually turned my focus, and I really thought I'd like to do something in healthcare. But then he passed away, and just as I did my leaving cert, and then I went to college. And when it was really when I was in college that I started to think a lot more about potentially going into business on my own. And I came out of college in the early 80s when it was pretty doom and gloom and very difficult to get a job. So I struggled actually to find a job, a proper job. I was doing odd jobs for about 2 years. And then eventually I got into telesales with Xerox, which of course was a great start because their sales training was phenomenal. And I worked with them, and then I ended up out on the road doing sales as well. And then I was looking to change jobs, and I registered with the company Grafton Recruitment to change jobs. And the lady there said to me, would you consider recruitment? So it was actually quite by accident that I got into recruitment.
And of course, technology was beginning to take off, and there was an opportunity, I suppose, timing-wise, for you to develop a skill set and relationships with tech companies and see what was happening there.
Yeah, I was always interested in technology, and as part of my degree, I'd done a little bit of programming. Although you'd never think it, given the conversation we were having earlier when they were asking me about what connections I had here. But yeah, I was always interested in the whole technology side, and I had asked them in Grafton, could I specialise in just recruiting tech people? But I thought it was really interesting then, in the late 80s and early 90s, technology was very much a meritocracy. And in fact, it still is. You live and die by your skills. It doesn't really matter where you went to school or what university you went to. It's really about your capability and I think your willingness to work hard and your talent. And I really liked dealing with technology people.
So you set up on your own. Was that a difficult choice? It's a risk for anyone who does it.
It wasn't a hugely difficult choice. I had started to talk about it and think about it. And then the husband of a friend of mine said he'd back me to set up on my own, a guy called Keith O'Malley, and he already had his own business, a company called Professional Placement. So he actually backed me to set up what was then Computer Placement. And then I bought him out in 1994 when he sold to Marlborough Recruitment.
So the business began to take off. The Irish economy was, beginning to take off in the 1990s. And you would have had the ambition for CPL to float it on the stock market? You know, lots of people set up businesses, maybe in recruitment, maybe in other sectors. They reach a certain point of size and they're quite happy with that. Were you someone who was always looking ahead and thinking, we can do more with this company?
I always think we can do more, and I always think there's more to be done. But I think, you know, one of the things that really drove me in terms of an IPO was that we're essentially a people business, and the importance of our own internal team and retaining that talent is hugely important. So one of the things that going public facilitated was allowing our employees to participate in the growth of the company. And that would facilitate retaining them. And that was very important to me, as well as raising, you know, some extra capital as well, because we wanted to do some acquisitions. We were absolutely specialist in tech at that point, and we were running into the whole .com piece. And of course, tech was the place to be. But of course, very quickly after we did the IPO in 1999, the whole tech market collapsed with Y2K, just after Y2K. So that was pretty tough.
With the IPO, the company is something that you built as a private business, and then you're putting it out there into the world. You're also putting yourself out there into the world in terms of an investment community, you know, very transparent accounting systems and, you know, reporting half-yearly figures and all of that. It brings its own pressures. Were you apprehensive about that at all, or did you see it more as, I have confidence in my business, so it'll stand up to whatever comes?
Well, I was naive, really. So at a personal level, I didn't realize it would attract so much attention personally. But I had a lot of confidence in the business, and I knew it would be really good for the brand. And I think clients really liked the transparency and that they were able to see our accounts and understand that we were a resilient business. So yeah, kind of mixed, really, you know. But overall, it's been good for the business.
And how did you manage through the .com? I mean, that must have been a real setback, having just floated on the stock market when the .com crash came.
Well, it's very hard when it was certainly very difficult. And of course, you're trying to work to some extent in the public eye, and your mistakes and your successes are very obvious. But, you know, I had a great management team. And we really got together and thought, you know, we're really reliant on this one sector. We really like the fact that we have a specialist ethos because it has really helped us build the business. So we want to maintain that kind of specialist skill set, but we don't want to be reliant anymore on any one sector. And that became very important for us, not to be reliant on any one sector, on any single client, or indeed on any single service line. So we, our first foray was an acquisition of Careers Register into the financial sector, and we maintained that specialism. They were specialist financial recruiters. So that was important to us. And then we also started to build out, I certainly saw the trend coming around flexible working, and we started to really look at the whole contract and temporary working space. And that has been very instrumental in terms of our growth.
When you look back at the growth of the company, what were the real milestones for you along the way? What sticks out?
Well, I think, you know, I'd say our first big client win, which was around 96, 97, I'll always remember that. Our IPO, definitely a significant milestone. Then in 2002, our biggest competitor was Marlborough Recruitment, and they were about 4 times our size, and they had expanded internationally. And of course, we'd hit quite a deep recession, and we ended up acquiring the assets of that business here in Ireland. And, you know, at 4 times our size, that was quite transformational for us. And then I would think that period between 2002 and 2007, our growth was pretty rapid. We also got into the healthcare sector around 2002, 2003. Again, as I said, I've always had an interest in that sector. I felt it would be counter-cyclical to the other aspects of our business, because our business does very much follow an economic trend, or the trends within the economy. And again, I think that was quite a significant milestone for us too.
Now, when you floated on the stock market, you were constantly described by journalists like myself as the first female chief executive of an Irish listed company. Was that something that was important to you? Did you see yourself as trailblazing for other women, or did you just see yourself as, well, look, I'm an entrepreneur first and foremost? That's it, you know?
Yeah, I mean, you know, those were early stages. I was just keeping my head down and working really hard. I didn't know that I was the first female chief executive at all of a publicly quoted company until I read it in the Irish Times. But you know, as time goes on, you do realise you have a responsibility with that. It's a very different world now, I think, for females in business and for female entrepreneurs than it was even back then. And so I think that transition has been really good. And I do think it's important, particularly for younger people, to have role models. So you do carry, I do feel I carry responsibility.
That's one of the things around female entrepreneurship that keeps on recurring, is the idea that it's really important to have women as role models, not just on boards of companies or in senior management positions, but as entrepreneurs. Do you think we're making enough progress in that area?
I think there's been significant improvement over the last couple of years, but I still think there's more to do. I mean, I'm involved, as you know, with the EY Entrepreneur of the Year program, and the EY team make an incredible effort every year to make sure to find those really good female-run companies. And this year, it was a fantastic female entrepreneur Nicola, who won the overall title. So I think it's really good to see that coming through. And I think entrepreneurship, particularly in the early stages, can suit a lot of women. It gives them a lot more flexibility. They've much more, maybe a bit more control of their own destiny. And I think then the thing we really need to do is to try and support women to scale and grow their businesses.
And what about entrepreneurship in general? I mean, things have improved in terms of our cultural attitude towards entrepreneurs, particularly since, the 1980s. And we've seen a lot more successes. How far down the road of developing an entrepreneurial culture do you think we are, and how much more do we have to go, or how can we help that?
Yeah, look, I think Ireland is a great place to do business. I think we have a good business environment, and I think the presence of a lot of the global multinationals here is very helpful for entrepreneurs starting out. And I think there's a good startup culture. But I must say, it saddens me, certainly, when I see some of our good entrepreneurs maybe going to set up in the UK because the supports are perceived to be better. I don't think entrepreneurship is maybe or rewarded as well as it could be. I think we particularly need to do something around share options and helping companies to get their talent to participate in the success of the company, and also potentially around maybe capital gains tax. I mean, it's a hard road, and it's a long road for entrepreneurs, and they do take a lot of risk early on. They do grow employment. And, I think they can be the engine room of the economy. And I think that balance between global multinationals and Indigenous entrepreneurship is very important to get right.
Yeah, it's been a big debate in Ireland for some time. There's one school of thought that says foreign direct investment has delivered so much, it's so essential, we need to keep getting that right. And another school of thought that says, ultimately, if we're going to generate long-term sustainable wealth in Ireland, we need more successful Irish multinationals and more Indigenous entrepreneurship. Is it about a balance? Do you think we might need to rebalance a little bit there?
I think it's not an either or. I think it is about balance. And if you think maybe companies like mine have certainly grown alongside the multinational sector as well as the Indigenous sector. I mean, when we started out, it was very much with some of the great young tech companies who then also scaled and grew. So I think getting the balance right is important, but I think a lot of the global multinationals are very supportive of entrepreneurship here. And we see that even in terms of the kind of incubators that do. We've just seen a recent acquisition there of Google, of a company like Pointy. So, I think there's really good synergy between the two. But I think let's definitely continue to support our entrepreneurs and maybe even do more for them and for those entrepreneurial startups.
Do you think that pursuing that entrepreneurship agenda, in terms of government policy and incentivizing it more, etc., that we need to look at the education system? I mean, there's the old line that entrepreneurship can't be taught. Maybe it can. What's your view?
Oh, I don't believe that it can't be taught. I think it can. I think it's just about, creating a little bit of inspiration for people. And I think within the education, like, we have fantastic, talented graduates here. There's no doubt about that. And they're hungry for success. And I think there could be more done in the university system around entrepreneurship and around, say your engineering courses, getting exposure to maybe some of the business courses and entrepreneurship, and trying to facilitate that.
When you look at your own success in business, if somebody was to say, right, Anne, how did you do it? It might be a long conversation, but if someone was to say, what's your formula for success, what would you say it was?
Oh, I would say for sure it's the team of people I've had around me at every different stage along the way. And you need different type of skill sets and different type of people for different stages of your growth. So managing that really well, I think, is an absolute key to success. And then I think, making sure, like one of the things I said, one of the milestones for us, making sure you have good systems in place. So when you get an opportunity, you can take it. But I'd call out more than anything, making sure you have the right people around you, not just people on your internal team, but also the right partners in terms of the professional services firms that you deal with, and so forth.
For those who are already running their own businesses, they're in a startup phase or maybe a little bit further on than that, any advice about how they can take their business to the next level?
Well, I would say, focus on your customer, first of all. I mean, the reason we're all in business is because of customers. So understand what a good customer is and who are the kind of customers that you really want to have. I think your team then, who you have around you, make quick decisions, or not necessarily quick decisions. Actually, I don't make quick decisions around people, but make your decisions, make good decisions, make sure you have good process and systems in place. I think one of the things that stood to us always that we were very early adopters of technology. And I smile because I'm even thinking when we started out in 1990, we had these old Amstrad machines, if you remember those.
Yes.
And and we were always trying to computerize, as it was called then. So I do think technology enablement is important. So I would say, your customers, your people, your technology enablement would be the areas I'd focus on.
Now, because of CPL and its role in recruitment, you've got your finger on the pulse of changes in work, changes in the types of jobs that are coming, a lot of talk about automation. So I suppose, first of all, where do you see the future of work in Ireland? Where do you think the future jobs will come from?
Well, I think there is no doubt that whole technology space is very important for every industry. So I'm not just talking about for the technology industry, but for people to be digitally literate is going to be really key going forward. And we can see that, you can see in place in such a short period of time since COVID. So I think that's very important. The whole area of data and data analytics and insight, very important. But so also too are areas like your brand, your marketing, financial skills. I think what will happen is automation will support and enable, but they won't take away full jobs. And what I see happening is the human skill is going to become increasingly more important. That ability to communicate. And now where we're all of us are working to some extent digitally, that ability to communicate in writing as well as to communicate face-to-face is becoming much more important. The ability to connect, work as part of a team, collaborate. Those that were kind of known as soft skills have certainly started to come to the fore a lot. Now, that's not to say that you don't need the technical skills, you need that too. And that's why, you see companies like Google and Facebook investing so much in making sure that they have the right level of engineers and they can get people trained and up and running. So I think there'll be a lot of change to the substance of jobs. But I think, and we see it in lots of sectors.
But when you look at, let's say, for example, the health sector, which has been enormously in the spotlight through COVID, and we're all incredibly grateful for having the medical professionals that we do during this time. But you're very familiar with that sector. One of the things that the COVID pandemic has done is it may well accelerate the role of technology and telemedicine and GPs doing consultations over Zoom on the one hand, but on the other hand, in acute care, it really shows the importance of, I don't see robots replacing nurses anytime soon.
No, I couldn't agree with you more. I do think telemedicine and technology enablement around the whole area of medicine could bring great advances. Even in terms of things like documentation and all that. But really, would you want to be cared for by a robot? Can you see that? How quickly can you see that coming? We see now where robots do play a part in operations and things like that. But in terms of the actual caring for people, just that understanding of what people are going through, the judgment calls, I think it's the combination really of technology and human interaction that's going to be very fascinating as we go forward.
And inevitably in manufacturing, we are seeing, that automation has a bigger part to play. And there's a question then about whether that displaces jobs or not. But it also, other sectors, whether it's even accountancy, is becoming more digitized, digitalized. So therefore, it will have a part to play in the future of work in services, won't it?
It will. The talk early on was all around automation really impacting, would have been known as blue-collar jobs, and as you say, in manufacturing and maybe in big warehouses and distribution centres. But no, it's across the board. It will affect the professions like law and accounting and so forth. But don't forget that in all those, while in all those professions also, you need an element of judgment. You need an element of connection with people. You need to be able to do business development. People need advice. They want to talk to another human being and tease things out with them. So I think the human connection in all aspects of the working life, I think, will continue to the fore. I don't see that going away anytime soon.
It's difficult, isn't it, to really
impacted more than others. And you see already, even with COVID, when I see with retail, just how quickly and how much retail went online. And then you say, well, will people go back to the way it was? And what impact will that have on jobs, for example? And that's hard to call, because maybe we're going to move into a more experienced type economy where people will go to their shops for a different type of experience, and they might still buy their stuff online,
When it comes to hiring, and you talk there about what were traditionally known as the softer skills and good people skills, a bit of cop-on, emotional intelligence, these kind of things that people talk about. Very hard to teach that in school, again, or in college. It's about life skills. And increasingly we're hearing that in the realm of hiring, that companies at least are talking about hiring more people from more diverse backgrounds do you see that as something that will become more important?
I think it will become more important. And I think, look, I think one of the things that's most important now when you're hiring somebody is, are they open to learning? Do they have that ability and curiosity and need and drive to learn? Because, everything is changing so fast. So you do your degree and you do it and whatever, but really, is that what you're using 2 years down the line or 3 years down the line? Information becomes out of date. You can find information, knowledge anywhere. So you're really looking for is people who can adapt and who are curious and who are open to learning. And I think that's the kind of assessment companies are thinking about now when they're hiring, or at least starting to open their minds to think about, rather than saying, I've lost this person out of this role, so now I need an exact replica of this person now with this exact skill set. You've got to be looking a bit further down the line than that.
We are in a crisis. It is bringing about its own difficulties, social, personal, health-wise, the human cost and the economic cost. But there is a tendency for crises to bring about innovation. We saw it in Ireland, for example, after the last crash 10 years ago. People would have said, what an awful time to start a business. It'd be a terrible time to start a business. Everybody's broke. The country's in crisis. And yet, during that period, we've seen some really fantastic businesses set up, in the last 10 years. And sometimes it comes out of crisis. Do you think we'll see a greater level of innovation now as a response to this crisis?
I do think we'll see a greater level of innovation. And I think, even if you look at a global level out of the last crisis, companies like Netflix came forward and, in 1999 or 2000, when we had the whole .com thing, Google was only really starting out. So when I look across the startup ecosystem here, you see some businesses that, I think it will be winners. And I think that real drive and thirst for innovation when people are in a crisis is really one of the things that pushes entrepreneurs to grow their business. The other thing that was very interesting is back in the day, certainly I would have noticed on the technology scene, some of the great Irish tech entrepreneurs out of the 90s were people who were made redundant out of companies like Digital, for example, back then, and a lot of them set up their own businesses. So sometimes entrepreneurs are forced into a situation, sometimes it's something that they've had a driving passion for. I don't think there's a case of, that's what, there's one size fits all. I've had this burning idea and this is what I'm going to do. There's lots of different avenues that people get into entrepreneurship on.
So what about the future then for you, Anne? The CPL is being or has been taken over by the Japanese corporation. Are you going to remain as chief executive, and are you looking forward to, I suppose it'll be a very different situation. CPL was your baby, you nurtured it, brought it up, and now it's part of a bigger group.
Yeah, no, I am staying on. I am staying on as CEO of CPL. I think it's a very interesting time in the workforce and a very interesting time for employers and for people. And I wouldn't like to be sitting on the sidelines as this change is occurring. I also, I'm very passionate about making sure that CPL transitions well and does really well within the outsourcing group. I think we have a tremendous opportunity, operating out of Ireland with such an avenue and access into Europe. I think we can bring a lot to the party for outsourcing as they can for us. So yeah, still a lot to do.
Do entrepreneurs ever retire? Does it happen?
Hard. I think it can be hard. I think it's hard for anyone to retire, to be honest with you. I think work brings a lot more to us than just earning a living. There's the whole connection with people. There's working towards a common goal. There's all those things. And I think from an entrepreneurial perspective, if you have that interest and that passion about business and you're curious and always looking at ideas, it's very hard to switch that off. And actually one of the things where I think there's a lot of opportunity is for, maybe entrepreneurs who've had a couple of exits to link, and maybe don't want a full-on executive role in terms of founding and growing a business, to link up with younger people. And I think if we could get that ecosystem going right, where we could mix people with lots of experience with people who are starting out, I think we could have some magic around that.
Is that something that you tend to do, or that you will do more of in the future, is to identify startups or companies that you'd like to invest in personally?
Yeah, I'm very interested in that space, and I have made some investments in the past in startups, and I'm always interested. I'm really interested, to see how companies can grow and scale, and what they can bring to the broader economy.
Now, you've reached a point where the sale of CPL is going through, and Trinity Care Homes, and together, yourself and Paul, it's been said, I think you stand to make 110 million euro from the sale of CPL, or something in the region of that. It's a lot of money. Now, for those of us who have not built up successful multi-million euro businesses, it's easy to look on and say, well, would you not just put your feet up and go and live on a beach and relax? Why keep going?
I think it's more back to what I said to you earlier. I don't know that happiness is about doing nothing. I think happiness is much more, to me anyway, it's much more about having a sense of purpose. It's much more about, connecting with people, working together, seeing people realize their potential. I think they're the kind of things that actually bring fulfillment. Much more than sitting on a beach would do. There's a place for sitting on a beach occasionally, but you could do it all the time.
And what about? Well, I think I could if I could get away with it.
Richard now.
But what about downtime generally, Anne? I mean, how do you relax? How do you unwind? How do you not bring the business home in terms of thinking about it or talking about it a lot? How have you managed those things?
Well, I have 2 children, so that's always been a busy part of my life. I mean, they're young adults now, so they take up a lot less of my time. And during COVID, I took up golf, so because it was probably one of the only things you could do. But actually, I've found that I really enjoy it, and I actually really just love hanging out with friends as well.
Sure. Well, we have a number of questions that have been sent in from participants. Let me just fire a couple of them at you now. One here, someone says, congratulations to Anne on the recent sale of CPL and Trinity. What are your future plans? Will you continue to work with CPL, which we have talked about? And they talk about entrepreneurs retiring, and can entrepreneurs retire, is the way they've worded the question, which is an interesting question.
I think it really depends on your personality and what other things you are interested in and that you do. I mean, you see a lot of entrepreneurs really getting involved in the not-for-profit sector, for example, after they maybe have had a successful exit or have built a successful business. I just don't think it's in their DNA, though, to sit on the beach, as you said, but I think they can put themselves to some really good work.
Sure. Another question here, how will changes to the way we work affect our homes and future plans for Dublin and regional development? Are there real opportunities for increased regional development?
I think that's a really interesting question. I do believe that there's significant increased opportunity for regional development. I think, I would certainly have known in CPL that we had people commuting into our office in Percy Place, commuting in from maybe Eden Derry, Mullingar, Wicklow, Portlaoise, quite a distance. I don't think people will want to go back to commuting at that level. On the other hand, we do as humans need that social connection, and as teams, and to really get the energy and the best out of people, they do need to connect. So that's why I think that hybrid working model could be good. But I do think there's an opportunity, say, for example, in the regions to have workplace hubs where you come in and have top class technology, where people, co-working environments, where people can really link in a fast and real-time environment with their team, and then maybe reimagine the use of your head office space around that more collaborative type working environment. And I suppose then to think about what's the impact of that on our cities. If our people are, say for example, CPL, if we have 20% of our people, or 20% of our people are working 2 or 3 days a week from home, they're no longer going out to buy the coffee in the coffee shop or the lunch there or whatever, then it does have an impact on the smaller businesses around the city. But equally, it may cause a whole regeneration in the regions where you'll have new restaurants, new coffee shops, so there might be a little bit of a balancing of that. Now, having said that, history will also tell us that, pandemics have often been thought before that they would have a major impact on cities, but cities, keep regenerating and keep coming back. But I think there'll be some displacement initially, would be my guess.
And in a way that provides an opportunity for, to use the phrase, rural Ireland in the general sense. It might be towns, it might be more rural communities that people would have an opportunity to go back to where they're originally from and to do that. So do you think we will see, one of the interesting things I read about New York City, they've seen a population decline as people are moving out during the pandemic. And in some cases, if they had a job, an office job in Manhattan, they're still able to get paid in full to do that job. So they're deciding we're going to move to Colorado or somewhere else. And in London, a combination of Brexit and COVID, because of those factors, a lot of non-nationals who were living and working in hospitality or whatever in London, there's an estimated 300,000 of them have gone home. So the question is, will they come back again? That would mark big changes for cities if those patterns were maintained, wouldn't it?
Yeah, it would indeed. It would indeed. But maybe over time the city regenerates itself. And, cities offer a lot of things, your access to the airport, theatre, events, things, that maybe only at a large scale a city can bring. But I think overall, I certainly hear a lot of younger people and younger parents looking at the possibility of moving outside the major cities where they can get better value for money in terms of housing, a bit more space, less commute time. Now, it doesn't suit all types of jobs. That's okay for your professional and your knowledge worker, but not every job can be facilitated in that way. But I think overall, creating a bit more balance is better.
And you do think that if we can get the infrastructure right, whether it's these sort of hubs in towns, whether it's rural broadband, that there should be a reasonable economic boost arising from these new patterns?
Yes, I would think so. I would think the regions will do well out of this. And I think I wonder, are we already seeing it? I think they should be doing well. And did I read somewhere that property prices are rising more in the regions than they are in Dublin? Although apparently Dublin at a residential level is still doing well. One of the other interesting things that we've seen is that many, we're talking about people having gone home to their country of origin. The other thing we're seeing among some of our clients is where people have gone home to their country of origin and are working from there, that they're now being asked to come back. Not necessarily into the office, but, from a tax perspective, they need to come back and be resident here in Ireland.
Yeah, because the remote working phenomenon has raised the question that if I could do my Dublin-based job in Claremorris or in Ballina or in Donegal, do I really need to be in Ireland at all? So when it comes to foreign direct investment, people have speculated that perhaps we might see investments of corporate entities investing in Ireland, but not necessarily hiring in Ireland. Do you think that's a danger?
Yeah, yes, I think people will hire where they can find the talent. So I think it's really important that Ireland is a good destination for people to live and work. And I think at government level, that's what they should be focusing on. And, you know, what are the things that make a place a good place to live and work? Safety. I think Ireland's pretty good on that. Really good education system. People really focus on that when they're looking at where they want to live. Quality housing, you know, good technology, good infrastructure. And I think there needs to be a serious focus on making Ireland a great place to live and work.
There's another question in here, Anne, and it's about remote working, but with a different slant. It says, remote working has given rise to an always-on culture. What are Anne's thoughts on the right to disconnect and how employees can have a better work-life balance? What does the future of work look like for employment security and working conditions?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. And the whole area of a right to disconnect is very topical at the moment, because I think a number of government departments are looking at bringing in policy around it. Now, my thought on that is that Ireland's employment legislation already caters for a right to disconnect to the extent that we have very clear rules within the Organisation of Working Time Act about the number of hours you can work, about your rest periods and so forth. And I'm reluctant to think it's good to bring in anything that takes a flexibility out of the workforce. So, for example, Richard, how would you feel if you were told, you know, that you can't sign on at 10 o'clock at night because that's the time you want to work? Or if you're living in the west of Ireland and you're working for a global multinational and your time zone and the most effective times for you to work are from 2 o'clock to 10 o'clock and you like to have your mornings off. So I think we need to think very carefully about this right to disconnect. And what I would say is more important for management and leadership within companies to be responsible about their expectations. You know, there's been case law where it was KeyPack versus somebody or another where they were sending emails late at night, and she took a case and won the case because under our Organisation of Working Time Act, she really effectively didn't have to work those hours. So I think we need to be sensible about it.
But doesn't it depend on where the push is coming from? So, for example, it's nice to have the flexibility to say I'm going to do some work at 10 o'clock at night if I'm choosing to do it at 10 o'clock at night, as opposed to I'm getting communications from the office or from my boss saying, you need to do this at 10 o'clock at night. It's a matter of who's calling the shots, isn't it?
Well, it is, of course. But I mean, does different legislation, what we need to look at is, does different legislation to what we have already change that? And it's more important. I think we see a lot of companies now and a lot of leaders within company will have a note at the end of the email saying, I'm sending this email, you know, because it suits me to do this now. Please don't feel the need to respond. So I think that's just about, you know, we keep bringing in legislation and confusing some of the legislation that's there already. And, you know, poor drafting and stuff has unintended consequences. I think we need a sensible look at where the future of work is going and what's the appropriate legislation for how our workplaces are going to operate in the future, as opposed to just kind of picking off little topics one at a time.
There's another interesting question here about developing a corporate culture in a world where there is a lot more remote working, which may well have benefits for both the employer and the employee. But let's say as somebody who runs a business and manages a business, how do you develop a distinct corporate culture where people are not seeing each other as much, basically?
That's definitely a bit more challenging, and you've got to be more mindful about it. And certainly what we do in CPL is we've really upped our level of communication. It's all about communication, and you know, it's the small things about it. The start of a call or the start of a meeting, we have some chat about life in general, not always straight into the meeting, the same way as you would if you were walking into an office to chat to people, but also very clear, you know, just much more communication right across the board. And I think that's essential. And then we do a lot of work to keep engagement up. We've done a lot around health and well-being. We do things like virtual coffees where you randomly are picked to have a coffee with somebody across the organisation and you don't talk about work at that. I also think in terms of the overall piece around culture, you know, being clear on your values and talking about your culture and talking about what's the expectation around culture and how you expect people to communicate with each other, you know, even across technology is very important. And I think those things help to keep the engagement up. We also have kind of parties online and stuff like that where we'll all, you know, different teams will get together and, you know, either have a dinner or have a few drinks, or, you know, we might have some event online. But I'd be looking forward to when we can get people together for an event. I do think.
Well, I'm convinced when we're all vaccinated and COVID is gone that the online parties will probably end.
I think they will too, Richard. Nothing beats that human connection. Sure, it doesn't.
Yeah, so some things will last. I'm not sure if the online party will be one of them, but I'm conscious of the time. Anne Heraty, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you very much for talking to me today. And thanks to everyone who submitted questions. And I'd like to hand you back over to Larry.
Thanks, Richard.
Thank you very much. Anne, I have to say, a really insightful and fascinating interview. Very well chaired by Richard. You got as much out of Anne Heraty as you're going to get in 55 minutes. And I think every one of us can take away some wonderful nuggets about the future of work, the future of the workplace, the future for entrepreneurs, maybe rural city rebalancing. And these are all thought-provoking. And I have to say that you always provide a beacon of light and inspiration and hope. And in a time where lots of people maybe are losing a little bit of it, your drive is incessant, and it's a great example of what you can achieve, whether you are a man or a woman, and it's immaterial. So look, thank you all for joining us today. If you want to stay in touch with the RDS, please follow the handle at the RDS on Twitter, or follow us on LinkedIn, or indeed become a member at rds.ie. You can look forward to future 2030 Vision interviews with Mairead McGuinness, EU Commissioner, and Dalton Phillips, CEO of the Dublin Airport Authority in due course. Just a final thank you then to Richard Curran, broadcaster and author, and to Anne Heraty, of course, of Chief Executive of CPL Resources. Thank you so much for your time, and thank you all for joining us today.
Sorry.